Hey, ladies and gents, we're back with some Avorion, and I'm on my backup mic since I'm having some issues with mics. So it's going to sound a little strange. I might sound like a high-pitched little boy or girl, whatever. We're going to talk about fighters in this video. The big thing about fighters is they're quite useful in this game. Everything from the attack to the salvage to the mining. What do you need when you first want to use fighters? Well, you're going to have a hanger block. You don't get the hanger block until you get to Trinium. Up to that point, you're not going to be able to mount fighters on your ship. Once you get to Trinium, you get the hanger block. What do we want to know about the hanger block? Well, there's a couple things when you're putting the block on your ship. You'll see the two rectangles coming out of the ship here. One in red, one right in white in here. Both of these have to be white. Otherwise, the hanger block will not operate correctly, and your fighters will not operate correctly. So they have to be white on both sides. As you can see here, one side's white, one side's red. If you move it to the bottom side here until we get a little bit clearer, or a little more clear, for example, right there. Now they're both white on both sides. That means this hanger block is operating correctly, and the fighters will operate correctly. Something to remember when you're building your ship. You know, if your fighters are not coming out of the hangar bay, this is probably why, because it's obstructed somehow. So you got to make sure you do these hanger blocks correctly, otherwise they won't work. All right, that's the first thing we need to know about fighters. Second thing we need to know about fighters is where do we find them? Well, you find them in fighter factories, and this is of course to buy them, of course. And the other one is to buy them, of course, is the equipment dock. Either and or carries them on hand, and they usually carry quite a few different versions of fighters, cruise shuttles, and all that kind of stuff. This one has got a laser fighter, it's got a salvaging fighter, it's got another force fighter, a bolter fighter, it's got a mining fighter, and then there's cargo shuttles and cruise shuttles. Cruise shuttles, of course, are used for when you're going to board enemy stations or enemy ships. Cargo shuttles are what you use to shuffle material around between stations and mines and stations, either and or. Those two down there are pretty self-explanatory. You can build them, of course, at the fighter factory if you want to, but we're going to concentrate on the actual, either the combats, salvage fighters. Like I said, the cargo shuttles and the crew shuttles, kind of just pick those up as we go, because they're pretty self-explanatory. But and I'm doing a video on factory chains, so we'll use the cargo shuttles there, and I think you've seen the video with the crew shuttles about boarding things, and then we're going to do another video on the boarding things too as well. Alright, so that's where you find if you're going to buy them, and they can be rather expensive. They can go from the 50,000 or 80,000 for a crew shuttle all the way up to the 1.52 million credits for something that mounts, say, lasers, railguns, or whatever. So equipment docks, and of course fighter factories. Now if we want to build fighters, we have to actually go to the fighter factory. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to get a little closer here. Oops, why am I talking to the rubber factory? There we go. Alright, fighter factories. We're going to build some fighters. We're going to go to the build fighter mode. To build a fighter, you have to have a blueprint of a ship. So I'm talking about blueprints of the ship, and then you got saved over in your files over here. It has to be under 200 blocks to be able to use as a fighter. So any ship that you have or whatever can be used as long as it has less than 200 blocks in its build. For example, this is the one I'm going to use right here. I think this one's only like 50 blocks, so plenty good enough for what we're doing. We're going to put that there. Now, what are we going to use it for? So now you can mount any kind of turret on this ship. You can mount missile launchers, you can mount railguns, you can mount Tesla turrets, you can mount mining, salvage, force, everything that's over on my right hand, you can mount on this thing and put it on your ship. So, for example, we are going to build, let's do a double neonite R salvaging turret. We're going to mount that to the ship. So when we do that, we're going to get 30 points. And this 30 points are going to be for size, durability, maneuverability, speed. Alright, so the whole thing about building the fighter is what you're going to be using it for. So this is going to be was a salvage one? Yep, it's a salvaging fighter. So we're not going to worry about durability, maneuverability, and speed. We're not even worried about size. Well, we could worry about size, depending on how big you build your hangar. Your hangar is going to dictate how many fighters you can have. The bigger the hangar is, the more fighters you can have. Or you can make the size of the fighter smaller, which will help a lot. But the problem is that you keep adding things to it. For example, you can notice the costs keep going up here. So we're going to drop it down to a size 1. So a size 1 is going to cost us 9 points. So now I can fit quite a few fighters onto this, or onto the carrier. Durability, once again, this is not something that's going to get into a fight. So, or speed. Speed might not be a bad thing, especially if it's moving around the sector. So we're going to up that a little bit. We'll go up to 100,000. Maneuverability and durability, once again, this is not going to be something that's going to see combat, so it's not really that important. You're going to have to kind of match off costs, right? Do you want to spend 100,000 credits for a fighter, a mining fighter? It's entirely up to you. So we're going to create that. Now, before I do that, there is, like I said, something else we need to talk about for what we're going to use the fighters for. For example, let's put the railgun on here. And you notice that the railgun this one's got 295 DPS. When you mount it on a railgun fighter, you're going to notice it drops down to 44. So you're not going to get the full damage out of whatever gun you're using. So a lot of times you try to find the highest DPS gun you can if you're going to build combat fighters and put it on there. Now, railguns, as far as I'm concerned, railguns, lightning guns, and anything with over 10 kilometer range. Because see, the problem is, even if I completely put this to the max for speed, is only 600 meters a second. If you're fighting against multiple ships or ships that are moving at speed, most of them move over to 1,000 meters a second. So your fighters are going to be struggle to catch them. So if you're using, say, for example, something that's got plasma turret that's got 5 kilometers for range, you put that on that fighter and you put it at 300 speed, 300 meters a second speed, you're not going to be able to, unless all the enemy ships are completely converged on your carrier or whatever you're using. It makes it a little tough to get into a fight with those fighters when they can't even keep up with the ships. So it's something to remember when you're building these combat fighters is, speed, that kind of thing. Durability, maneuverability, of course, it all depends on it. If you get the longer range turrets, of course, you're going to be more effective because they can reach out, even if they can't catch a target, something with like 14, 15 kilometers range, obviously, they can't outrun a railgun. So something to remember here. So let's get back to what we're going to build with the salvaging turret here. We're going to put it, we'll put it up to speed up to 300. We'll put the size down to 1. So that used up quite a few points, 13 points, and we have 122,000 credits. So we're going to create that, and you see that it took the salvage turret away and it took my cash away. So that I don't have access to that turret anymore. That's something to remember. If you're going to build them straight from the factory and you're not going to build them with production blocks, you're going to have a lot of turns to fill out a squadron. So with that said, pretty easy, self-explanatory how to build fighters. You just pick a turret, pick a what do you want to call it? A blueprint from your folder. Pick the turret, and then decide what you're going to do. The stats for the fighter, or cargo shuttle or crew shuttle. These actually you don't have to put any of this stuff on there because you're not going to use them for combat. So cargo shuttle and a crew shuttle, and they're usually quite a bit cheaper. You can notice quite a bit difference, and they also have stats as well. Once again, for example, the crew shuttle, if you're going to board a enemy ship, you want something that's relatively quick. Otherwise, it can't catch the ship it's trying to board. However, if you're using the crew shuttles only to board stations, then it doesn't really matter for speed. Obviously, durability means more because if a station has, say, point defense guns and it's going to be shooting at your shuttles, you want to make sure the shuttles can survive the boarding process. So something to remember, just a little bit of thinking when you're building these, what you're going to do. So with that said, we are going to look at the new fighter that I just produced. We're going to go over here to the hangar, and here we go. So now, in the hangar, you're seeing 10 or 12 squadrons of, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 squadrons of 12 fighters each. Now, when you go to build build these fighters, you got to make sure, for example, in this one, let's get rid of this one. There's going to be a new squad here. So if you haven't built fighters before, you're going to want to make sure you make a bunch of new squads that you're going to be able to put the fighters into. That's something to remember. Now, we got our fighter, which is this R salvaging fighter. To use the R salvaging fighter, it's just going to be a simple matter of going out and clicking on an object and using it as there's a commands over here on the side here, which would be harvest. So I already have a set of salvaging fighters here. We're going to move this guy down here to this row, which is a salvaging fighter. Now, what are these blueprints over, or what are these spaces over the side here? There is a way. Honestly, let's do that. We'll do that last. What we're going to do is here now we just built some. I have some mining fighters, and I have some salvage fighters. So to use these mining, especially the R mining, the R salvage, if you just have a regular mining, you can put the regular turrets on here, which doesn't require processing. You're fine. However, if you're going to use the R mining and the R salvage, there's a few things you got to do to be able to do that. And one of those is you have to have a cargo bay. So I don't have a cargo bay on this thing. This thing was not made for salvaging. This is essentially just to carry combat. So we have to put a cargo bay on there, and we're also going to have to need. You're also going to need a transporter block, which you only get in Xanian. The block does not have to be big. That's all you need right there. So when you add that, you're going to get this up here. So you have a transporter block, but you're missing a transporter software. So get the software. That's pretty easy. You're going to have to go buy one, find one, or steal one. I have a couple right here, and that's what they look like. They're transporter software. To put that on there, you have to install permanently. And once you have that installed, now your fighters are able to salvage or mine. For example, there is a big block of trinium right there. We're going to roll over there, and we're going to use our mining fighters to mine that asteroid. And I really don't like that thing when they all take off. So we're going to take the mining, and we're going to tell them to go after that asteroid right there. So now you see that they're all taken off. They're all zooming away. And once they get there, they're going to start mining that asteroid. And you're going to see this is what the whole transporter thing is, right? So they're collecting material and they're transporting back to the ship. That's why you need the transporter block and the software. So here's the first part of it. Yep, there they go. So they're collecting the trinium and they're transporting back to my ship. Now, before we use just mining ships, this is a different way of doing it. You can build a salvage carrier and put these on there, and then do the same thing. Put a captain on the ship, and send it to a system, mine it, send it to a resource to refine it, and you can loop it. Same thing. This does the same thing as just a regular mining ship with turrets on there. However, this is a little bit, in my opinion, the way to go, because it's these. If you get, say, 100 of these on a ship, they will completely clean the system rather quickly, quite a bit quicker than just a regular ship. So they're doing their thing. We're going to roll in here. Let's pick them up again. We are going to go do some salvage. We're going to show you how to do the salvage thing real quick. Let them guys come back. You can see there's all kinds of commands here. So this is the salvage one. This is the mining one, and these are the fighter ones. So the fighters can attack, they can defend, return, and of course you can collect your lost fighters. Defend, if you turn them on defend, they'll come out of your ship and they'll circle around until somebody shoots you, and then they'll defend you, of course. Attack, you can just completely sick them on somebody to go after them. So I'm pretty sure that was all of them that just came back here. Let's see if we can find some wrecks real quick. There's a couple baddies right there. Let's see if we can get close enough to maybe use some of our fighters, our attack fighters, I should say. All right, they look like they're fighting over some stuff. We need something to salvage anyway. So let's roll up here. We got. There he is. All right, we're gonna tell these guys to attack. There they go. They're gonna bug. They're gonna run out. And this is what I was talking about, the whole speed thing and range. These guys are just chain gun fighters, so they're gonna have to get really close to that target before they're gonna be able to do any damage. You're seeing that they're finally starting to get close here, and they're gonna start. Yep, there you go. Some of them are launcher fighters. They have rockets instead of. There we go. So we helped destroy that. I think, is that all there is left in the system? I think for baddies. Yep. All right. So we've used the attack fighters. Now once they've did their attack run and whatever they were attacking is no longer available, they'll come back and go into defense mode, which means they'll start circling around the ship. So we're going to bring them guys back in. We're going to return them, and then we're going to salvage that wreck up here. So this is what I was talking about, the whole thing with fighters, how versatile they are. You can have multiple squadrons on your ship of fighters, salvage, and mining, depending on what you're doing. Alright, so these guys are all back, and there is our first set of salvage. It's a wreckage, and we're going to switch over to the salvage, and we are going to drop off our salvage fighters. And they're just going to act just like the miners, except, of course, they're not mining. They're not mining asteroids. They're just going to salvage this wreck for us. Alright, so there we go. We're already picking up some neonite. Picking up quite a bit. Yes, there we go. 3,000. And this is what I was talking about earlier with how much more productive it is to use the salvagers. We picked up quite a bit of neonite off that one little wreck already. So we're going to bring them back. Yeah. So there we go. That's the different versions of some of the fighters and some of the salvagers and all that kind of stuff. Now back to what I was talking about with the whole building fighters. Now, when we were looking at it over there on the, we need to bring this back up here. When we were looking over there on the, when we were over there looking at the fighters, it was costing us a fair amount of cash to build a fighter. We can use, for example, here, this right here is a blueprint. To get a blueprint, we have to take a fighter. For example, let's take this R miner up here. And to make this work, we have to use what they call a assembly block. And we get assembly blocks starting in titanium. Where'd they go? There's that titanium assembly. So we start in titanium, I do believe. Oh no, we get them in iron too. The assembly blocks, what they do is it creates what they call a production on your ship over here. You can see the production capacity. What this does is allow you to build fighters on your vessel. So we are going to use a Xanian assembly, and you can see now that's highlighted in blue here. Just like anything else, we're just going to put a block here, and we're going to slap it in place, and we're going to go back up to here. So this one was already building, and you can see there's a percentage. Obviously, this is going to be probably like 4,000 or 5,000 trinium, but we're going to use the arm miner here. So we're going to drop this over here, and it's going to tell you this will destroy the fighter and turn it into a blueprint. This action is irreversible, blah, blah, blah. So you're going to lose the fighter, but however, you're going to gain the blueprint, and now you're going to have the ability to produce fighters, unlimited fighters, as long as you have the material and the time. So we're going to do this, and it's going to give us a time. We're going to enable it here. So this fighter here is going to cost me 7,682 trinium, and it's going to take 1 hour and 16 minutes. Now that's all going to depend on the size of the production block. I only have 68.4 production a second. I make a bigger block, obviously the faster it produces. You have two different production lines. You might want to use two separate blocks. It seems to help. So yeah, you just have to make a bigger and bigger blocks of production to get faster production of your fighters. Now you noticed when I was using this, the material is trinium, because that was the turret that I've used. The turret that was on this ship is made out of trinium. So the material that you're going to build these fighters on depends on what kind of material your turret is. So this here was a trinium mining turret. Put it on the ship, or on, this was actually something I bought, but it's the same process. So that the material is going to decide, or the turret is going to decide the material that the ship's going to be built out of. So if I wanted to build one of these, this one's made out of Xanian, the salvaging fighter. If I use this as a blueprint, all the fighters are going to be built out of Xanian. So you got to make sure you have the material, of course, to build the fighters. So this is still at 30%. This one's 5,141, so it's got 34 minutes left before it produces a fighter. Then after that, it's probably, it just keeps producing. However, it takes a long time. So you're going to have to imagine that this is going to take a massive chunk of production for you to turn out a decent size or a decent amount of fighters this way. It beats, of course, going over and buying fighter after fighter after fighter from the fighter factory and the turret after turret after turret. This is way more efficient, costs quite a bit less. However, it is a slow process unless we have a different way of doing it. But we do have a different way of doing it. We are going to use a mine. So we're going to jump over here. We're going to switch the craft in here, which is the Excalibur. And I use mines, stations, and or depot ships to do this because they're large immovable objects. Therefore, it's very easy to mount massive blocks of production on those vessels. That way, I don't have to mount it on my ship. If I need fighters, I'll just fly over to the mine or wherever I got the production blocks or whatever's producing my fighters and load them up. So let's look here at the copper mine. Where is he at? There he is. There's the copper mine. This ship has got some fighters on there, so we're going to roll over here. We're going to have to do a little preparation work here before we'll just get this thing close enough so we can transfer a fighter over to it to show you what I'm talking about. This is a copper mine. You can do this on any mine or any station. Alright, so let's tee over to it. And we're going to go to the builds. And what we're going to do is, so this one's got, of course, 0 production here. We're going to the Xanian assembly, and we're going to produce. There's 1, 2, 3. So we're at 1,540. Now, if you put those on a ship, you're going to have a pretty good sized ship, of course, to put this much assembly on here. So we're going to add a couple more. And there we go. We're at 2,566. Let's add some crew there to straighten that out. Oops. Hire crew. Oh, hit the wrong button. Alright, so we're going to hire that just to make that work. Alright, so that gives us our production. Now, to make this be able to produce fighters, we're also going to have to add, we're going to have to go to the ship here. I'm sorry, we have to go to the builds, and we're going to have to add a hangar bay. And we're just going to use, we'll use Xanian because I have more Xanian than anything else. And that's just simply adding a block to the bottom. Or adding a hangar block, I should say. There we go. Got a hangar block to the bottom. And of course, we'll have to, if you're going to build big fighters or a lot of fighters, that block's going to have to be big enough to handle this. I'm just doing this for the deal, but you're going to have to make a big enough block. And you'll see over here, hangar space is 332. Yeah, and it gives you an idea of how much room you have in that hangar block. If I'm going to produce, say, 120 fighters here, it's going to have to be a pretty good sized block. But once we got that hangar block in there, we can go up here and we can go to the hangar and we can create some new squads. You know, so originally this thing looked like this. There was nothing here, and to be able to produce fighters, you have to create the new squad. There's a new squad, there's a new squad, there's a new squad. So we have the same thing we had on the ship now, but we have it on a mine. So we're going to run over here to this ship, and we're going to get close enough. Alright, so we're going to interact, and we're going to transfer fighters. Now, I do believe we used, which one did we use? We used, yeah, we'll use a Tesla fighter. And we'll just transfer, we don't want to do all of them. Yeah, we'll just leave them here. Actually, you know what? We'll just leave a squad here. We can always use that for defense if we have to. So we're going to switch back over here. We're going to go back to here, and we're going to take one of these Tesla fighters and put them up here, and we're going to switch him over to here. Yep, set the blueprint. We'll do that, and we're going to enable production. So you notice now the difference. This is 5,367 neonite, and we're talking about a 1 minute time to produce a fighter. Just because of the sheer amount of production blocks I put on there. And it wouldn't matter if it was Trinium, whatever. Trinium probably would have been a little bit longer with those Trinium fighters, but not much. This is just showing you the difference, why I use mines and stations to produce fighters than putting it on my ship. There you go. So with that said, fellas, thanks for watching. This video got out of hand for lengthwise, but hopefully you guys enjoy it. Thanks for watching, guys.